The winter air over Germany was thin, sharp, and cruel. At 22,000 feet, the sun was just a pale disk, barely cutting through the cold mist that hung like a ghost over the clouds. The world below was a war zone. Burning towns, broken tanks, the black scars of bombed roads. Inside a fading Messerschmitt Bf-109, a young pilot named Franz Stiegler gripped the controls tighter than ever. His fuel gauge had already kissed zero. Every sputter of the engine was like a countdown, one breath closer to death. He looked to his left. Nothing but silver-gray sky. To his right, endless emptiness. Franz had been flying since dawn, protecting what was left of the crumbling German front. The air smelled of oil and metal. His lips were dry. His eyes stung from the smoke that had filled the sky all morning. He was 24 years old, but the war had aged him twice that. In the quiet hum of the dying engine, memories whispered. His mother's voice, soft and trembling. "Promise me, Franz." Never shoot a man who cannot defend himself. Back then, it felt like a gentle lesson from home. Now it was a rule he carried like a cross. Below him, the enemy stretched endlessly. American tanks crawling like ants, cities smothered in ruins. He knew the propaganda by heart. The Allies show no mercy. They burn, they destroy, they kill without question. And yet, as he sat there watching his last drop of fuel fade away, he wondered, was that really true? His radio crackled, faint voices distorted by distance. His squadron was gone, his commander's voice lost in static. He was alone now, drifting over enemy lines with no escape, no backup, and no hope. The Messerschmitt coughed again, a violent shudder through the frame. The propeller slowed, whining like a dying creature. Franz checked his altitude, dropping fast. If he bailed out now, the Americans below might shoot him before his parachute even opened. If he tried to land, the crash would kill him. He cursed under his breath and slammed the dashboard. Verdammt. The plane groaned in reply, metal creaking, wings trembling. The sound was hollow, lonely. He leaned back, staring out at the gray horizon. For a moment, there was peace. The kind that only comes when you've run out of choices. And then, a flicker. 2 silver dots on the horizon. Small at first, almost invisible against the pale light, but growing larger, closer. Franz's pulse spiked. His heart slammed in his chest. P-51 Mustangs, American fighters, the most feared hunters in the sky, fast, elegant, and merciless. He swallowed hard, his throat dry as dust. "Not like this," he whispered. Not in silence. He braced his hands on the controls, waiting for the burst of gunfire that would tear through his fragile plane. But instead, the 2 dots moved closer, separating. One of them broke away from formation, heading straight toward him. The engine was almost gone now. Every sound it made was a dying heartbeat, uneven, fading, hopeless. Franz gripped the stick tighter, but he knew it was over. His Messerschmitt had become nothing more than a falling bird. The sky was no longer his ally. It was swallowing him whole. He looked down through the glass. The fields of Germany stretched below, but they were no longer his homeland. The front lines had shifted. That land now belonged to the Allies, and to land there meant surrender, or death. His mind raced. Should he jump? No, if he ejected now, the Americans would see the parachute and open fire. Many German pilots never made it to the ground alive. Should he try to glide? Maybe find a clearing and pray the landing didn't crush him? The plane trembled again. The propeller slowed to a lazy spin, like a child's toy winding down. In the stillness, he could hear only his own breath and the faint groan of metal under stress. Franz's thoughts drifted. He remembered the early days of the war, when he was young, proud, and foolish. When the sky felt like a game and not a grave. Back then, flying was freedom. Now it was punishment. The clouds parted briefly, revealing a small town below. Smoke rose from chimneys. Life went on, people cooking, walking, existing beneath the roar of war. It felt almost cruel that the world continued while his was ending. And then, something caught his eye. Far off in the distance, 2 bright flashes. Moving fast. Closing in, his stomach turned. He recognized the silhouette instantly. Long nose, broad wings, shining silver in the sun, P-51 Mustangs. The American eagles of the sky, faster, stronger, untouchable. Franz's heart pounded. He'd seen what they could do. One burst from those 6 Browning machine guns could shred a bomber in seconds. His Messerschmitt wouldn't last a moment. He muttered to himself, "So this is it." His voice barely a whisper. The first Mustang passed above him, scanning. The second came lower, circling. They had him. A dying German plane over their land? Easy prey, a perfect kill. Franz waited. His finger hovered over the canopy latch. Maybe he could jump the second they opened fire. Maybe he'd have a chance. But the shots didn't come. The Mustang didn't attack. Instead, it slowed, matching his glide. The 2 planes were now side by side, cutting through the frozen air in eerie silence. Franz could see the pilot clearly now. A young man, perhaps not much older than himself. The American's goggles reflected the dull winter light, but his eyes were calm. Not angry, not hateful. Franz stared back, confused. Why wasn't he firing? The American raised one gloved hand and pointed downward, a signal, a gesture. He wanted Franz to land. Franz blinked, unsure if he was dreaming. Mercy in the middle of a sky filled with death? As the Mustang stayed beside him, silent and steady, Franz felt something break inside him, a realization that not even war could erase humanity completely. The 2 enemies drifted lower, wings trembling in unison, 2 soldiers on opposite sides, sharing one fragile moment of peace in the dying light. For a long moment, Franz couldn't move. He just stared at the silver P-51 gliding beside him, the enemy who, by every rule of war, should have already ended his life. The 2 planes drifted through the clouds, their wings almost aligned, their propellers spinning in slow, uneven rhythm. The air between them felt charged, heavy with something no bullet could pierce. Franz's mind raced. Was it a trick? Was the American playing with him? He reached for the trigger out of instinct, then stopped. His ammunition was gone. Even if he wanted to fight, his Messerschmitt was empty, hollow as his courage. The American stayed perfectly still, watching him. The pilot's face was hidden behind the oxygen mask, but his eyes told a story, focused, calm, human. Not the monster that propaganda had described. Franz could feel his pulse in his throat. The American gestured again, this time more firmly. He pointed down and then made a motion with his hand, like lowering a bird to the ground. Land, Franz frowned. Land where? Below them was enemy ground, fields, snow, and captured airstrips. Landing there would mean capture, maybe worse. The American tilted his head slightly, then pointed again, more insistently. His Mustang stayed steady, wings level with Franz's dying aircraft. He wasn't leaving. For the first time since takeoff, Franz felt something strange in his chest. It wasn't fear, it was disbelief. The P-51's nose dipped slightly, urging him to follow. Franz hesitated, then lowered his plane a fraction. The Mustang matched it instantly, staying by his side like a guardian. Down they went, through a veil of thin clouds. The sun flickered across the cockpits like liquid gold. Inside the Messerschmitt, Franz could hear the wind whistling through bullet holes in his fuselage, the echoes of past battles. Every second he expected the Mustang to turn and finish it. But it didn't. Instead, the American kept pace, close enough that Franz could see the small name painted under the cockpit. Angel's Play. How strange, he thought. The devil sent me an angel. He raised his hand slowly, trembling from exhaustion and shock. The American saw it. For a moment their eyes locked. 2 soldiers who'd never met, yet somehow understood each other completely. Franz mouthed the words silently. Why? The Mustang pilot didn't respond, only pointed again, this time with a sharp nod. The ground was close now. The hills rolled beneath them like dark waves. Dotted with ruined barns and the skeletons of tanks, Franz looked one last time at the P-51. The American raised his hand and made one final gesture. The universal sign between pilots, a rocking of wings, a farewell. Then, the P-51 pulled slightly ahead, gliding just in front of Franz as if clearing the air, leading the way toward safety. For the first time in years, Franz felt something he hadn't known since the war began. Trust. And as the sky opened before them, He realized this moment would stay with him forever. Not as a victory, but as a miracle. Franz's hands shook as he followed the Mustang's lead, descending steadily toward the captured airfield below. The world around him felt unreal, silent except for the whisper of wind and the faint groan of his powerless Messerschmitt. Every instinct screamed at him to prepare for death. He expected the Americans to open fire at any second. Every shadow, every movement on the ground seemed like a threat. Yet the P-51 beside him remained calm, steady, unwavering. It was as if the pilot was saying, "I will not harm you. I will see you through this." The runway stretched below, narrow, unfamiliar, lined with American planes, trucks, and soldiers. Franz's heart pounded in his ears. He had trained for thousands of combat situations, but never for this, being shown mercy by the enemy. He glanced at the Mustang. Its pilot's hands were relaxed on the controls, his eyes focused, scanning the airfield. Then he gestured again, a slow push of his hands toward the runway. Land. Franz swallowed hard, disbelief warring with fear. Could this be real? Could someone truly act with such humanity in the middle of a war? The ground grew closer, 10,000 feet. 9. 8. Each second felt like an eternity. Franz's gloves were slick with sweat. His breath came in short, shallow bursts. He could feel the entire weight of the war pressing down on him, his country, his family, his own mortality. Then, a subtle movement. The Mustang rocked its wings, a final, unmistakable signal. Franz understood immediately. This was the pilot's way of saying, "You will make it. Trust yourself." The Mustang began to pull away, slowly, leaving him alone to descend the final stretch. Franz's stomach tightened, his hands gripping the stick until his knuckles were white. He lowered the landing gear manually. There was no hydraulics, no power, and prepared for a rough touchdown. The runway rushed up to meet him. He braced. The Messerschmitt slammed onto the concrete, bouncing violently, its wheels screeching, until it finally skidded to a stop at the far end. Silence followed, heavy and unreal. For a moment, Franz remained, frozen in the cockpit, heart hammering, gloves still clutching the stick. He couldn't comprehend what had just happened. He had expected death, and yet he was alive. Jeeps and trucks appeared immediately, racing toward him. He tensed, expecting shouts, rifles shoved against his back, perhaps even bullets for daring to survive. But the soldiers approached cautiously, with careful steps, not aggression. One reached out, steadying him as he climbed down. "Easy there, buddy. Are you okay?" the man asked in broken German. Franz's mind reeled. This isn't what I was taught to expect. This isn't what the war promised. He stepped down slowly, legs trembling, and suddenly the weight of disbelief, exhaustion, and gratitude crashed over him. In that moment he realized something he would never forget. Mercy existed, even in the middle of war. Even among enemies. And someone who had every right to kill him, had chosen not to. It was more than survival. It was a gift. A reminder that even in the darkest sky, humanity could shine through. Franz's legs trembled as he stepped away from the Messerschmitt. The winter air was cold, but he hardly noticed. His mind was still suspended between shock and disbelief. He had expected to meet hatred, bullets, and derision. Instead, the Americans approached cautiously, not as conquerors, but as humans. A sergeant with a sidearm, not aimed, reached for him. "Out!" he barked, in clipped English. Franz obeyed, every step heavy with tension. He expected rough treatment, shoves, a rifle pressed into his back. But instead, the sergeant steadied him. "Easy there. You okay, Verletzt?" The word, injured, struck Franz like a lifeline. He nodded, still trembling. The soldier didn't scold. He didn't mock. He simply led him to a waiting jeep. No violence, no humiliation, only guidance. Inside the vehicle, Franz smelled the warm, mundane aroma of army coffee and cigarettes. Another soldier handed him a canteen. Cold, clean water. Franz whispered, "Danke," and the soldier smiled. "You're welcome, pal." It was surreal. Everything he had been told about the cruelty of Americans, their barbarity toward prisoners, melted in that simple act of care. A cold beverage, a hand to steady him. And suddenly, the enemy seemed human, capable of empathy. At the operations building, warmth engulfed him. A mid-40s officer, glasses perched neatly, greeted him politely. "Captain James Mitchell, sit please." He offered coffee and sugar cubes, small comforts that Franz hadn't known he could still appreciate. He took a sip, the warmth spreading through his frozen fingers. The taste, coffee and sugar, was ordinary, yet extraordinary. It reminded him of childhood mornings, of safety, of a world before bombs and fire. "Some of our pilots saw your engine was out," Mitchell said. "They figured you might prefer to live through the day." Franz stared at his coffee, words failing him. They didn't shoot me. He had expected death. They had every right to kill him. And yet, they hadn't. Mitchell shrugged, as if the question were simple. "Because you were defenseless." "What kind of men do you think we are?" No one had ever asked him that before. Not in Germany, not in the war. The propaganda had painted Americans as monsters. But here, the truth was different. Shocking in its simplicity, its decency. Over the following days, Franz's disbelief only grew. The barracks where he was held were warm, the bunks shared with other captured German pilots who, like him, were stunned at the humane treatment. Meals were regular, medical care prompt. Guards were professional, not cruel. Young men who seemed more like watchful neighbors than captors. A medic examined his frostbitten hands, cleaned and bandaged them despite Franz insisting he was fine. An American nurse brought food and blankets, simple acts that carried more weight than years of propaganda. Franz began to understand. This was not weakness. This was strength. The strength to choose dignity over cruelty, mercy over vengeance, humanity over hate. For the first time in months, years, he felt a strange, fragile peace. The enemy had given him a gift far greater than survival, the knowledge that even in war, decency could exist. Life at the POW camp was nothing like Franz had imagined. The stories he had been told, of brutality, mockery, and starvation, melted away like snow in spring. Instead, the barracks were warm, filled with bunks, blankets, and the faint scent of freshly cooked meals. He was stunned at the care and attention given to him and the other captured German pilots. Food arrived regularly. Hot soups in tin mugs, rations that seemed paltry in size but extraordinary in intent. Each bite was nourishment, each meal a subtle act of dignity. A medic examined his frostbitten hands carefully, applying ointments and bandages, despite Franz insisting he was fine. And when he objected, the medic simply smiled and shook his head. "We take care of each other here," the gesture said. One day, a familiar figure appeared at the barracks doorway. Captain Joe Henderson, the Mustang pilot who had guided Franz down. From the sky weeks earlier, stepped inside carrying a thermos of soup and a small pack of cigarettes. The look in Henderson's eyes was the same, calm, patient, human. "Thought you might be hungry," Henderson said, his voice filtered through an interpreter. Franz found himself speechless. The man who had once been his enemy was now offering comfort and warmth. They spoke quietly. Henderson complimented Franz on the dead stick landing, noting the skill required to safely touch down a powerless Messerschmitt on an unfamiliar runway. Franz could barely respond, the words caught somewhere between disbelief and gratitude. They had tried to kill each other, and now, here they were, sharing a simple moment of connection. Henderson showed Franz a photo of his wife and children. Franz nodded, thinking of his own mother and sister back in Bavaria. The human bond transcended the war. transcended flags and sides. For the first time, Franz understood that honor wasn't defined by which uniform you wore or whose flag flew above you. It was in your choices, your ability to act with decency when you didn't have to. That night, Franz sat by a small lamp, in his barracks, pen in hand, and wrote in his diary, "They treat us not as monsters, not as enemies, but as men. Today I saw what honor looks like in a uniform not my own." The words flowed slowly, reverently. Each sentence etched the lesson deeper into his heart. Mercy, he realized, was stronger than force. Discipline was more than following orders. It was moral courage. And kindness, even to an enemy, could leave a legacy far greater than any victory in combat. In the days that followed, music drifted through the camp. Swing, jazz, and brass melodies found their way to the prisoners, unlocking long-buried memories of childhood and life before the war. Guards and medics shared laughs with the prisoners, teaching them songs, letting them tap their feet to rhythms long forgotten. Franz felt an unfamiliar warmth, one that had nothing to do with the stove or the blankets. Honor, he understood, could exist even amidst destruction. Humanity could shine even in captivity. And as he drifted to sleep that night, Franz knew he would carry this lesson for the rest of his life, a beacon amid the shadows of war. Years passed. The war ended and Franz returned to a Germany that was both familiar and shattered. His hometown lay in ruins. His family had endured loss, and yet life demanded he rebuild. He trained as a commercial pilot in the 1950s, flying for Lufthansa as Germany slowly rose from the rubble. Yet, no matter how many miles he flew, part of him remained suspended in that sky over France, 22,000 feet above death, cradled by mercy. The memory of the Mustang pilot, Captain Joe Henderson, never faded. Franz wrote letters to veterans organizations, searching across oceans for the man who had spared his life. For decades, there was no reply, only hope and the persistent echo of that fateful flight. Then, in 1989, a letter arrived in Canada, where Franz had immigrated and built a new life. The sender was none other than Joe Henderson. The Mustang pilot had been searching too, tracking the young German pilot he once guided down. They spoke over the phone, and soon arrangements were made to meet. 44 years had passed, but when they saw each other in the airport terminal, the years melted away. Two old men, once enemies, now embraced, the weight of history folding into a single profound moment of humanity. They shared stories, laughter, and tears. Family photos were exchanged, Henderson's wife Betty and their children, and Franz's mother and sister. Life had moved on, yet that day in the sky remained the axis on which their bond turned. The reunion wasn't about glorifying war, but about recognizing the power of compassion. They spoke to schools, veterans groups, and historians, sharing a story that was nearly lost to time. A story not of bullets, but of choice. The world had tried to teach them hatred, but in a brief moment, they had rewritten its lesson. Franz's diary from 1945, preserved carefully through the decades, contained a single line that captured it all. "Today, I learned that strength is not in domination but in mercy. That honor lives not in flags but in choices." This belief guided the rest of his life. He carried it into his work, into his relationships, into the way he viewed the world. He had learned that true courage was not measured by victory over an enemy, but by the humanity you could show when you had the power to destroy. Franz passed away in 2008, but the story of that day lived on. Henderson and Franz remained lifelong friends, a living testament to the power of mercy over violence. Franz's grandson, now a German Air Force pilot, flew missions wing to wing with American pilots, a legacy of reconciliation, trust, and the enduring impact of a single, courageous choice. Sometimes, the greatest victories don't come from bullets, but from mercy. And in a world often consumed by conflict, the memory of one pilot choosing honor over hatred serves as a reminder that humanity, even in war, can prevail.